The last two Genshin Impact updates didn't really give us much to talk about, they were a lore drought essentially, except for one single item, Perinheri. Perinheri? I honestly don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, these two books were something we really needed, especially because the story they tell us is very intriguing. As always, this is a theory video. I will use information available in the game, but my theories and conclusions are not to be considered the official lore of the game, unless I got something right and it's confirmed in a later update of the game itself. With that being said, let's start this video with a short recap of the two books. The story takes place in a very ancient time, when Khaenri'ah was ruled by the Crimson Moon dynasty. The subterranean kingdom was often attacked by calamities that leaked into it, and sometimes people also got in and decided to live there. The people of Khaenri'ah didn't know anything about the rest of the world. The only ones who had seen it were the earliest founders, those few who had been sent on missions outside the kingdom, and those who defected to Khaenri'ah. Because of a story a child once told one of the sages, they believed that a child from a destroyed world would have eventually drifted there, and that child was supposed to be treated like a god. To welcome this god, they created an orphanage, but later it was also used to help the people who came to the nation from the outside in general. The problem is that this god never arrived, even after the Crimson Moon dynasty ended and the Eclipse dynasty took their place. Here begins Perinheri's story. His first memory was that of adults telling him to crawl through a dark corridor filled with coal ash. At the end of it, the exit was closed, so he knocked and some grown-ups asked him if he was dead, to which he replied out of desperation that he was, and then they also asked him if he had seen it. Perinheri did indeed have a sort of illusion. He saw the Crimson Moon in the sky turn around, showing itself as a titanic and terrifying eye. So the grown-ups let him in, because he traversed the fire of two worlds within the Hearth, and as a consequence he was reborn. Perinheri soon became a leading figure of Khaenri'ah, and he often competed with his friend, Cleobrant. Then a new member of the orphanage arrived, a young girl named Angelica. When Rex Lapis defeated her god and conquered the land, she fled her nation and took refuge in Khaenri'ah because she didn't accept him as her new god. Perinheri never really trusted or believed a word Angelica said, although he often dreamed of seeing the sights of the outside world that she described. On the other hand, Cleobrant fell deeply in love with her. Things went even worse when she said that she would have married the strongest person in Khaenri'ah, even making a list of the most valorous people of the nation, which led Cleobrant to find the stupidest excuse to fight against them to prove his worth to her and be chosen. Since his friend was definitely going down a dangerous path, Perinheri thought that the only solution to this madness was to get rid of Angelica. Because of this, Angelica and Cleobrant fled from Khaenri'ah, pursued by Perinheri. As soon as they stepped outside the nation, Cleobrant turned into a monster because he was a descendant of people who forsook their god and defected to Khaenri'ah, while nothing happened to Angelica and Perinheri. As she explained, she never betrayed her god and she left her nation only after this god was defeated, so she didn't bear the same curse as Cleobrant, while Perinheri drifted to Khaenri'ah, so he also never betrayed any god. The story ends with Angelica showing her true identity, that is freedom, and Perinheri alone in the vast world. These books are also known as Cleobrant Innamorato, which is a clear reference to Boiardo's Orlando Innamorato and to Ariosto's Orlando Furioso, two very important Italian chivalric romances. I'm not gonna recap the entire story from these books, but I will just point out the similarities and list them on the screen. Orlando Innamorato is all about Angelica, a woman from Cathay, the ancient name used to refer to China, who fled her nation to ask Charlemagne for help against her enemies. Angelica promised to marry the strongest warrior who would have defeated her undefeatable brother. A paladin managed to do that, but she didn't keep her word and ran away, followed by basically every single soldier because they were all in love with her. Among these soldiers, there was Orlando, the strongest paladin of France, who defeated everyone and everything to be loved by Angelica, his cousin Rinaldo included, who hated Angelica because of some kind of magic. Orlando Furioso instead is all about Angelica running, being caught, and fleeing, but what's relevant is that Orlando got lost in the forest and ended up where Angelica and Medoro, the man she fell in love with and married, consumed their marriage. When he saw their names carved on the tree trunks, he lost his wits, went mad and transformed into a monster. Only almost at the end of the book did Orlando get back his sanity because the paladin Astolfo went to the moon to retrieve his wits, because everything that got lost on Earth ended up on the moon. As you can see, the stories are indeed similar, but unless we actually end up going to the moon in Genshin Impact, because the moon seems to have a relevant role in Perinheri as well, I really don't think there's some kind of hidden message here. Before we analyze the story in detail, we need to remember that this is a work of fiction based on archaeological research into the ruins of Khaenri'ah, and above all, that the ending of the story was added in the second edition of the book by Mr. Jean Figeac. This means that, as most books in the game, we need to try and split the actual historical events from fiction. Now let's talk about what we learned about Khaenri'ah as a nation. There were at least two dynasties that ruled over the nation, the Crimson Moon dynasty that focused on alchemy, and the Eclipse dynasty that focused on mechanical engineering. We also learned about the Beastmaster Knights from the Crimson Moon dynasty who commanded the Dark Sprites, black wolves created through alchemy, so most likely Rift Wolves. The Universitas Magistrorum that was also named is not something new. We already know about it from the Orbits achievement, which talks about the Universitas Magistrorum providing the prediction the Almighty Sovereign requested about 2 stars that were captured by the world's gravity. It's kinda interesting to see that the people of Khaenri'ah believed in an Almighty Sovereign, which makes me think that they knew about the Primordial One and they never accepted the gods or the Archons because they were aware of who was supposed to rule over Teyvat. Anyway, the Universitas Magistrorum was also named in Jacob's log during the War Quest Pursuit, from which we learned that its members inverted the alchemical stages, inventing Chemia as a consequence. Then we also learned that Khaenri'ah was waiting for a child who was destined to arrive from beyond the world, more specifically from a destroyed world, which sounds like Either and Lumine specifically, and they built an orphanage just for this occurrence, but according to the book, it actually never happened. Another interesting aspect is that the earliest founders of Khaenri'ah probably used to live on the surface, and considering that Khaenri'ah was still in the process of being built back when Salvindagnir fell, we are most likely talking about either a group of people who found refuge underground in that period of time, or maybe they were originally from the Unified Nation and survived the destruction of Teyvat during the war between the Primordial One and the Second who came by taking refuge underground. I believe the second to be right because Dainsleif did tell us that the upside down city in the chasm looks a lot like the buildings of Khaenri'ah. Lastly, we need to talk about the Crimson Moon and the Dark Sun shining over Khaenri'ah. We all saw the Red Moon in the We Will Be Reunited video, which probably means that there was somehow a moon in Khaenri'ah, making the nation more like a domain rather than a simple underground cave, while when it comes to the Dark Sun, it could have been a mechanical device that was later invented to try and make living a little easier. Another possibility is that the Crimson Moon and the Dark Sun shining over Khaenri'ah are just metaphors to talk about the two dynasties that ruled over the nation. Let's now dive deep into the story and try to figure out what it really is about. The first part of Volume 1, so before Perinheri's arrival, is most likely the story of ancient Khaenri'ah, maybe toward the beginning of the nation, so during the Crimson Moon dynasty. The calamities that slipped inside the nation are very enigmatic, also considering how the kingdom's weapons were able to wipe them out. Considering that these occurrences happened because of the unique position of the nation, I would think that they were monsters of the abyss, meaning that Khaenri'ah was positioned, almost like Enkanomiya, at the borders of the inhabitable section of Teyvat with the abyss. In Enkanomiyan terms, we could say that Khaenri'ah existed in the human realm at the borders with the Void realm. They also had some knowledge about beings that came from outside Teyvat. This again could be knowledge acquired from the ruins of the Unified Nation they lived in. Probably something about the Heavenly Principles who are Descenders and are connected to the second who came. When Perinheri's story begins instead, we are most likely talking about events that happened around the Archon War, mainly because Angelica came from a land that was conquered by Rex Lapis. This creates a tiny problem though. The Beastmasters of the Crimson Moon Dynasty commanded the Dark Sprites, the Rift Wolves, monsters created through alchemy by Reindaughter. This begs the question, how old is Reindaughter? Could it be that she wasn't a Khaenri'ah but just an ancient long-lived being that settled down there? I mean, that would explain why she couldn't care less about the repercussions of her experiments on the people of Khaenri'ah. This could also mean that her long life may not be the result of the curse of immortality, but simply her being a supernatural being. Now, who could Perinheri be? Considering that we are talking about the Archon War period, it definitely can't be Dainslet, so let's exclude them. Perinheri is said to have drifted to Khaenri'ah like the prophecy said. Some adults told him to go through a dark tunnel covered in coal ash that led him to a guarded entrance of Khaenri'ah. Considering that people from other nations defected to Khaenri'ah, this wasn't the main entrance since it could just fit a child. But the question remains, why was that narrow corridor guarded in the first place? Then the fictional ending makes us believe that Perinheri didn't belong to any nation of Tevat, nor did he follow any god, but we can't be too sure about that because it's fictional. Now, you will most likely disagree with this theory I'm about to tell you, but I think there is a possibility that Perinheri was related to the third Descender. The period of time is right because the third Descender's remains became the gnosis that appeared in history when the 7 winners of the Archon War became Archons. Most Descenders also seem to have reached Tevat with another person. The 2 heirs from the Battle Pass and Eder and Lumine are clear examples. One is a Descender and the other is not. The same could apply to Perinheri, so he may have reached Khaenri'ah through the passage dedicated to the people who came from beyond Tevat, since the grown-up said that he traversed the fire of 2 worlds, but in the pair, he wasn't the Descender. If this was the case, Perinheri could still be alive somewhere, and he could be an extraordinary supernatural being just like, for example, Surtalogi, Skirk's master. The next topic we need to discuss is whether Perinheri's story has something to do with Arlecchino and the House of the Hearth. The points in favor of this connection may be the orphanage, the word Hearth that was said in the story, and the fact that Arlecchino's title is Dire Veil Moon, meaning something like ill-fated moon, and the red moon, like the one in Khaenri'ah, is usually believed to announce something bad is about to happen. Other than that, I honestly don't see too many connections, but I also don't mean to say that they are not related at all. If anything, I'm about to say the opposite. In my last video, the one about Arlecchino, I presented to you the idea that the House of the Hearth may originally be a Narcissenkoids Ordo base, especially because Arlecchino has almost the same body features as Kater, who was turned into a Hilichurl human hybrid by Renee, the master of the Ordo. Renee's story is basically all about researching 2 civilizations, Remuria and Khaenri'ah. His teachings as Narcissenkoids and his war formula are literally based on everything he learned about these 2 nations. Renee though was particularly obsessed with Khaenri'ah. He learned about their society, their beliefs, their practices, and even visited the ruins in person. He probably used alchemy to place Kater into the body of a Hilichurl, and when he failed his ritual to become Narcissenkoids, Jacob studied Khaenri'ah to help him out of his predicament. Something extremely important that we need to remember, as I said before, is that Karl Ingold, but also Kurosawa, had been involved with the writing of this book. Kurosawa was a member of the Narcissenkoids Ordo, while Karl Ingold's records of the investigations into an abandoned city were, most likely, what he saw when he accompanied Renee and Jacob into the Khaenri'ah workshop in the Girl of the Sands, where Renee found a ton of information about Khaenri'ah. Furthermore, Renee had always wanted to become or turn into a Descender, a person capable of challenging the world, despite the fact that you are born a Descender, you don't become one. Now, what I mean to say is that the concept of the orphanage, the Hearth, the Crimson Moon, and the Descenders were probably notions René learned from his research into Khaenri'ah, and he later applied them to the Nazisenkoids Ordo that was originally meant to be an orphanage, a new version of the Nazisenkoids Institute where he grew up in. Arlecchino's orphanage, the House of the Hearth, was probably named as such because of the hearth mentioned in the ancient Khaenri'ah documents he found. Moreover, since René wanted to become a Descender and saw both Jacob turn into an iniquitous Baptist and Carter into a sentient Hilichurl, so two kinds of beings capable of defying fate and survive the end of the world he wrongly predicted, maybe the Ordo kept conducting and refining these experiments for 400 years, to finally be able to find a way to create an artificial Descender, someone who, like Piero said about Arlecchino, would fight fate with every ounce of their being in order to earn the right to challenge it. And that's it, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and if you're interested in Genshin Impact theory videos, consider subscribing. As I said last time, my next videos are still going to be one about the 4.6 livestream and then one about the 4.6 quest. I've already almost finished writing the script for a new video about the Fatui, in which I'll try to crack something that hasn't been explained yet, and then I also have a Star Rail theory video coming up. What can I say, there's a lot to be done. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, over and out.